Welcome to my best campaign. Today we're talking to Jeanine Pesce, founder and creative director at Range. I think it's safe to say that Jeanine is an icon in the outdoor industry, whether or not she believes me. For years, she curated up and coming brands at the semi annual industry trade show Outdoor Retailer, and everyone knew that her trend report and the panel she put together at the Ranger Station were the things to see at OR. She really has become a trusted voice in the industry, and her agency Range consults on everything from product to brand and is that reliable source of what's coming next in shoes and apparel and gear for the active and outdoor industry, and sometimes even beyond. They've worked with some brands you may have heard of, like Patagonia, Keen, Danner Boots, Nike, Adidas, Reebok, small brands. But maybe more than anything, I think of Jeanine as a connector, and I've gotten to witness this close up over the last few years. She's been a huge advocate for better environmental practices and greater inclusion in the industry, and she's found really clever and creative ways to do that advocacy work. She also champions small, up and coming brands and uses her relationships to give them a leg up. And lucky for me, she's a regular contributor for my team at Monday and has even stepped in to fill leadership gaps for us in crucial moments. I think we should go right back to the beginning. Jeanine, how did you get into this world? Tell us the journey you took to get here.
Well, thank you for having me first and foremost. A big fan of Amanda and all the work that she does tirelessly at Monday. So happy to be a part of this community and part of the team. So I had a funny, very nonlinear path to where I am today. And like most stories, I'll try not to ramble too much, but I went to Drexel University in Philadelphia for fashion design. And I actually thought I was going to be a costume designer. My senior thesis project was a 5-piece couture collection that I constructed by hand. And I imagined that I was like a Christian Lacroix in the making. And I tirelessly like sewed at my desk for like 6 months. And I got into the real world. I moved back to New York, where I'm from, and started kind of pounding the pavement in the garment district. And I worked as an assistant designer for a few different brands, one called Mimi Turner, one called Toast. And I realized I wasn't a great technical designer. I didn't have a lot of confidence. And I had a friend at the time who was working for a French trend forecasting agency called Promo Steel, and she invited me to join their team. So Promo Steel is like iconic. They were one of the first trend agencies in the world. They literally created what we consider to be the first trend book in 1970. So it was like a very prestigious company to work for, and I learned a lot. It was very much baptism by fire, kind of just thrown into this like global corporate infrastructure of like very sage, wise men and women who had been working in trend forecasting for decades. So this was like early to mid 2000s. I graduated in 2003 from college. So it was like the height of streetwear, the height of sneaker culture. And I happen to know about a lot about that personally, coming kind of from like the skateboarding world and just like being really ingrained in subcultures in general. So I became the in-house trend consultant for any of the brands like in the outdoor or the active space that would come to work with us. So like if Nike or Reebok came or Vans would come in or Quicksilver, I would work with them on color and trend forecasting, which was 2 years ahead of traditional product development cycles, because it was all technical and performance, functional apparel, functional footwear. So things were on a faster timeline. So I'd be working like 2 years in advance. So if we were doing a forecast for 2008, for example, I would have been working with the client in like 2006. So I was always working 2 years ahead for my whole career, which was really interesting. And from there, I went on to become a senior active editor at Style Site, which was later acquired by WGSN. And in 2012, I went out on my own and I started Range, which is a creative consultancy that specializes in trend and color, strategy, consumer insights. And over the years, we've dabbled in other realms like creative production, experiential design, and content, both online and IRL in the form of a magazine. So it's kind of the short version of it.
Cool. I mean, this is the question that I think a lot of people have that I always have, which is just how do you spot a trend 2 years out?
Yeah, so I didn't, I listened a lot in the beginning and what I came to learn was that it's a kind of a combination of like a gut instinct and an intuitive, like almost like the way that artists can put color together. Like it's something that's like inside you. And then there's also like a very analytical component to it. So like what's happening in the greater zeitgeist, what's happening in innovation, what's happening in fiber and fabric and textiles. And so you kind of take this like top down and this like bottom up approach where you like look at what's happening in the world, the economy, politics, art, and culture, and then you kind of look what's happening around you culturally, like emerging brands, music, things that are happening like at a street level, and you kind of bring them together and they meet in the middle. So
Yeah.
it's not often that it's like one to one. It's not like, oh, there's going to be, polka dots are going to be the thing exactly on this day. But like there are mindsets and movements that kind of move slowly through and they evolve and stay relevant, or we kind of move through them.
Yeah. You're kind of always living in the future. Do you think even after, I mean, you still do a lot of trend work, but a
Yeah.
lot of your work is beyond trend now. Do you feel like you're still always living 2 years ahead of everyone else?
Yes, because I often forget what year I'm in. And it's cool because it's like I would never call myself a futurist. Like there's some people that are like really, really forward thinking analysts. I feel like I'm more interested in what's happening like right now and what's going to be important like to brands that they can like actionable things that can be changed or they that can be created right now. So I don't necessarily think as far ahead as I used to. I prefer to kind of solve problems that I can at the moment.
A big way that you've expressed that over the years is through Range magazine, which is
Hmm.
probably one of the first touch points that I had with you. I'd heard your name from a bunch of people, but then I got to see the magazine, and it over the years became this key reference document for a lot of people.
Mm.
It's also like, as a fellow agency owner, I know how busy it is. You're doing client work, you're acquiring new work, you're trying to manage
Mm.
the business. Adding a magazine to that is a massive undertaking. I can't imagine doing both at once. Tell us a bit about the magazine and why was it important for you and for Range?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely was a huge undertaking, and I was totally naive about that when I decided to do it, which was probably a blessing because I probably wouldn't have if I really understood how much went into it. It's like managing 40 small projects all at once. So it's funny, I was actually the editor of my newspaper in high school. So I've always had like a long-standing love for written word, and when I started to work in the active and outdoor space, I was analyzing consumer and market trends and then writing about it in the form of these trend reports. So I was able to combine my background in design with my personal passion for journalism in a fun way. And I remember desperately like wanting to be accepted by the outdoor industry since I was considered to be an outsider, coming from the fashion space and not really like an endemic outdoor enthusiast, quote unquote. And I would pitch like traditional outdoor publications like Outside Magazine, and even like some industry magazines that were more B2B. And I really wouldn't get anywhere because I'd be like, who's this girl? So I just decided to do it on my own. I launched kind of the agency and the magazine side by side, which was nuts. It was called Range, named after, so, agency. And it was dedicated to the intersection of design and the outdoors. And there really wasn't anything like it at the time, except for maybe Stay Wild, which was founded by Justin Scrappers Morrison. But other than like him and I, like exploring like non-endemic themes within the outdoors, everything else was pretty much like pretty binary, like gear reviews, expeditions, tall tales that were very inspiring and aspirational, but none of them were really rooted in the human experience that centered creativity. And that's what was really important to me coming from, with my background as a designer and in trend. Like I really wanted to tell narratives that celebrated creativity and design, as well as like aspirational things and nerdy stuff, which is what I was really drawn to about the outdoor industry and the active industry. Everything has to, at a ground level function. So that's where we get to start from. But yeah, it was really cool. And then I got to just build the kind of content I wanted to read, and it also like captivated and captured and captivated, I guess you could say, the mindset of this like new emerging outdoor consumer that was like more of this casual, creative recreationalist that perhaps was like living in a city like New York or LA or San Francisco and maybe just starting to discover the outdoors for the first time. So like that's who I was really interested in connecting.
What did it do for the business? Like, what does having your own print publication do and say about your own brand?
Yeah, so I had really big ideas and like I just, I don't know. I really wanted to do so many things. I was just like brimming with ideas all the time. So, I would say the magazine was really an incubator for ideas. And each issue had a different theme. So I could kind of like deploy this like call for submissions of whatever I felt like was important or happening at the moment, almost like through a trend lens. Like if it was like psychedelics were happening, I would, like that would be like the call for submissions. Like I'm really interested in stories that like explore abstract and psychedelic connections to nature. And I'd get this slew of work back at me that kind of like either validated or didn't validate like what I was thinking was a trend or what was starting to kind of happen. So there was like this funny thing where it was like kind of pressure testing some of the trend work I was doing as well. And we really could like dream up these conceptual or abstract ideas that, maybe some of the more black and white, true endemic outdoor publications weren't able to do. Like we didn't just have to focus on gear reviews and stories about inaccessible things. We could really like push up against the edge of what it meant to be an outdoorsy person and how we express ourselves and connect to nature, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Did you see your business grow as a result of it?
Definitely, because we could use the magazine to kind of pressure test ideas. So like I would meet with a client and they would be like interested in developing a campaign or a product launch or um, an influencer marketing campaign. And we could basically run it through the magazine to see if it would get traction. So brands would come to me and they'd be like, we're launching this shoe. We want to do something really weird. And I'd be like, okay, well, let's go to Joshua Tree and like, tie dye sleeping bags and I don't know, like just really wacky stuff that like people weren't doing. So the magazine was also free and it was distributed at about 60 stores throughout the US, including at some of my clients' stores. Like it was available at Patagonia and the North Face. So I had the support of bigger brands as well to kind of publish really creative, unique content. And I think they got a chance to like flex into topics they typically wouldn't be able to flex into. I remember one of the earliest stories was about color theory with Arc'teryx. I think it was in like the first or second issue. But like typically at that time, no one was talking to Arc'teryx about color theory. But I always was like, they have a good color palette. Who's their color designer? Like that's the story I want to tell about Arc'teryx, not harnesses and climbing and performance. So like I think I was able to always find unique ways to tell stories, and brands were then able to tell and utilize completely different narratives than they were in mainstream media.
Hmm. So this was like their little mini testing ground where they got to explore new concepts that might not land with their audience, might land with their audience, and this is like an affordable way to find out.
Yeah, and it was definitely affordable, which is part of the problem.
So they were paying to be in it, but not paying a
Yeah,
lot.
I mean, it was a lot of sponsored content and advertorials and branded content. Like when that was just starting to become a thing, we were definitely at the forefront of it. And I don't necessarily know if I was always publishing to standards, to the right standards in terms of what was considered to be an advertorial or sponsored content at the time. But I was like, I'm beholden to no one. I'm the publisher. Like, someone has a problem, they can call me out on it and we'll figure it out. I was very like, just flying by the seat of my pants, just putting gas in the plane while we were taking off. So
That's kind of
sometimes
the
it worked out really
magical,
well. Yeah.
yeah, that's the magical thing about owning your own branded content. And, Range isn't a brand in the traditional sense, but you
Hmm.
really were doing what we've historically seen some really interesting brands do. Like I'm thinking of Acne Paper and some of the big
Hmm.
magazines that were
Definitely.
able to be really groundbreaking and elevate those consumer facing brands. You did that just on an agency side of things.
Yeah, and there was a time when I didn't know if I was going to be an agency or like a consumer facing media platform. Like there was a lot of opportunity to lean into that space too. We did a lot of like co-collaborative project with brands, and we did a lot of, content creation, especially on social media. We were really active on social media and had like a really engaged following. But I realized the more that I looked into that, I would really have to sacrifice the kind of content I wanted to make in order to, you know, feed the algorithm and check off the boxes when it came to SEO and have really clickbaity-esque content. And I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to be like no rules, whatever I'm feeling and whatever I'm seeing in the industry, like that's what I want to do and talk about. Like there was this one really and super fun campaign we did with Subaru, and it was part of this like meet the owner campaign that they were doing, which was like typically pretty much like, oh, this is a Subaru owner and this is how he like or she drives his car and this is what they do. And I was like, let's do something more interesting. Like, so we kind of combined an advertorial with like a brand experience, and we curated this like massive group art show in downtown LA called the Open Pass. So we had about 35 or so artists that were in some way inspired by the outdoors that were part of the group show. And then we did like a really focused film and stories in the magazine based on three of the artists that also happen to be Subaru owners. So we had Heather Day, Mikkel Kennedy, and Jeff Thrope were kind of a combo. And then Jay Nelson. And like Jay built out like a Subaru Brat from the 80s that we sourced and tracked down on eBay. And he like built this whole geodesic dome with a heater in it. And like, we just really like went outside the box, and they were super happy. I'm not sure what the KPIs were on it. We had a really well attended event and really great content. But for me, it was just about like exploring unique ideas and then connecting brands with emerging creators and artists that had similar values. And that part was like fun and satisfying.
Yeah, sounds like a real clear, like top of funnel brand affinity
Hmm.
play,
Hmm.
and really making Subaru a consideration for maybe a creative class that wasn't
Yeah.
engaging with it at the time.
Hmm.
I know
Yeah.
that beyond just making the teeny bit of money that you did and collaborating with brands, you sort of had even a bigger mission around fostering community. And there was some maybe deliberate or not deliberate changes that you were helping to foster in the industry. How do you think the magazine supported that community and some of the changes that have happened in the last 10 years?
So I would say first and foremost, the outdoor industry, which is like where I associate myself with, like when I say I'm part of an industry, I always start with the outdoor industry, is like the by far the most community focused space I've ever been a part of. And I think that's what I was drawn to the most. And it all really started for me at Outdoor Retailer. I think you mentioned that a little bit earlier. I used to do trend presentations at every show. I started going in like 2005, and doing seasonal trend presentations, and I kind of got to know everybody that way. So people would come to my presentation. I would stop by the booth. I would talk to the PR people who were really like the gatekeepers of everything at the show. Like if you knew the right PR people, you could basically have a conversation with anybody you wanted to in the outdoor industry. So I really like built really tight knit relationships with everybody. And I just thought it was so fascinating, so interesting. So like I was really interested in textiles and innovation. So for me, it was like a really cool place to be. And like I had never really experienced anything like that coming from the fashion industry, which was, as you can imagine, very clicky and cagey and like not very inviting or accessible. So in 2014, I started to work more closely with Outdoor Retailer as an advisor on that new section of the show that they were launching, Venture Out, which you also mentioned. And then in 2017, I actually stepped in to take it over completely from Scott McGuire, who had originally worked with them on launching it. And that's when I created the Ranger Station. And I would say that's when community really started to like everything started to coalesce at once. So the Ranger Station became this hub for like panels and presentations and workshops and parties. So We always had the magazine available. I would kind of time the launch of the magazine with the outdoor retailer trade show so that a new issue was always dropping at the show. So there was a lot of buzz around people stopping by the ranger station to pick up the new magazine. And a lot of the programming at the ranger station was inspired by the content that was in the magazine itself. So that was also a nice holistic way to kind of close the gap on content strategy. And and it really catered to this like new emerging kind of consumer that I mentioned, that was just starting to just find the outdoors. So, think about like when Polar launched and Topo Designs launched and Rumpel launched, Sunski, like these are now, profitable, small to medium sized businesses. And this was the beginning. So we kind of all came up together and we felt like it was this really kismet connection that we had. And it was just like kind of a big family and we all belonged together.
How do you think all of that shaped the industry and what it's become now?
I think at the time, and this is by no means like meant to be controversial, but it is going to come off sounding controversial. The outdoor industry was pretty much like a white, male dominated, cisgender kind of members only club. And I don't even think we even realized it at the time. It's just what it was. Like being a woman was unique. Being a white woman was unique in the space, So like the first way I started to kind of chip away at changing things was to talk more about women because I was a woman. So like that was easy. I was like, okay, we can start with gender, like let's talk about how we're not serving women. And I launched this presentation called The Modern Outdoors Woman in 2014, I believe I did it, that kind of spoke to, the opportunities within the space to develop and design better stories and product for women. And at the time, everyone was like, oh my God, this is revolutionary. Like, no one's ever, women, they're out there. So that year, I literally went to almost every brand that I worked with, from Patagonia to Levi's to the North Face to Mountain Hardwear to Merrell, and presented it to them. And they were just like, wow, women, it's a thing. And then that really like kind of cannonballed into like, okay, now we're really doing this. So I started to pull in other women that were like starting to take up space, like Jen Gurecki from Coalition Snow, Johnny Gail from She Explores. And we started to just kind of band together and support each other. And like that was where like community started to bubble up and build. Then I'd say around 2015, 16, we started to see another wave of like, I would call it more like DEI focused initiatives start to build momentum. So we started working closely with affinity groups in the space, and groups like Native Women's Wilderness, Out There Adventures, which brought kids from the LGBTQ plus community outdoors, Diversify Outdoors, which was centered around people of color and introducing them to the outdoors. And we wanted, in partnership with all of these affinity groups, I wanted to make sure they had a seat at the table because like being a white woman, I've had the honor and the privilege to kind of get people's attention just by showing up. It was quite evident that the affinity groups were having a harder time getting the brands to really give them the attention that they deserved. And that was a big change as well. And I'd say once though the DEI and affinity groups kind of started to come into the space, I actually started to back away like more and more and felt like it was time for me to kind of like pass the baton to the next generation of leaders. Because I'm not an expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion, or gender studies, or anything around that. So I kind of just started doing that like Homer Simpson, like backing up into the bush and like stopped talking so much and kind of started taking a back seat to some of the panels and moderating and the content. And like it felt like it was a natural time for that to happen. And yeah, so in a way, I definitely think we played a role in redefining and reshaping the industry, and hopefully making it a little bit more equitable for everybody.
How many issues of the magazine did you end up doing all
We
in?
did 11
Wow.
print issues, and they were, in the beginning, like the first issue was newsprint, like a tableau size newsprint, that would like fold over, and then by I think issue like 5, we did saddle stitch bound, like more traditional printing. And actually, there was even a precursor to Range magazine, which was called The Scramble, which I produced with these two amazing women, Emily and Yasha, who had a zine called The Usual that they used to make in partnership with Patagonia. So it's like a deep cut. And it looked like a Jehovah's Witness, like Awakenings magazine. Like it was really small and like thin and flimsy. And that was actually the first magazine I published, and it was like I called it like a guide to outdoor retailer. So it was like always very much linked up with OR.
Yeah. When you look back, so 11 issues, so many photo shoots, so many stories, a lot of events and partnerships. What were the things that worked really, really well? Maybe specifically for the brands that you worked with, but also for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like building real, genuine relationships and like really showing up for people and not just because like I had to. Like I really genuinely wanted to show up and the like as the best version of myself for people. I'm definitely the kind of person who like makes themselves available to just about anyone pretty much all the time, which can be incredible because like I genuinely want to see people succeed and feel empowered to do the work that they're most passionate about. But I mean, I also can overextend myself, which we can talk about later. Um, but I think that I wanted Range to feel like it was everyone's. I wanted Range to be a platform for everyone to use and like benefit from. Because I felt like we were, like I mentioned earlier, like all coming up together. And if this was the platform that we could use to amplify voices of underserved communities or affinity groups or a women's hiking club, like I was like, let's do that. Like let's really lean in and use this community that we've built to and this platform we've built to promote our community, and like let's share in our collective success and like bring everybody along. And because that was always a priority for me, I think I can still reach out to pretty much anyone I've ever worked with, whether they were like a collaborator or a content creator or a client, and like with any request, and they'll be like, sure, I got you, let's do this. Like they'll
I've
have my
witnessed it.
back. Yeah, because I have always had their back.
It's true. You mentioned overextending yourself. What were some of the challenges you encountered along the way?
Yeah. So it's funny, I always describe myself as like having an entrepreneurial spirit, but not like being a legit businesswoman. Which is hysterical because like I've been running a business for 12 years. So like yes, I am a businesswoman, but like I'm literally not trained in like I don't have an MBA. I didn't go to business school. I was trained as a fashion designer in college, and um, I was influenced by my parents because they owned a restaurant when I was growing up. So I was always exposed to like the daily parts of running a business, but like the really hard parts of running a business, like scaling businesses and accounting and bookkeeping and HR and all that, I really didn't. I felt like I wasn't really experienced enough to meet the moment. And I think because I was good at a lot of things, I stretched myself a little too thin. I was like, we can do, like, it was the epitome of the girl boss movement. And like, everything was like, lean in. Like, Sheryl Sandberg was like, well, you can have it all. And I was like, you actually can't have it all. And like, I was like, I want to be a girl boss too. But the reality is, like, if you want to have a family, and you're a small business owner without any kind of like generational wealth to keep the lights on, and you want to be like maintaining some semblance of like become like a real human, like you're gonna run into a brick wall at some point. And I think that's basically what I did. Like it was a combination of like trying to have it all, trying to scale and grow, like really stretching myself too thin and making myself way too available for too many people and too many companies and too much support. And then we hit about like $1 million in sales in 2018 on the agency side, and that had always been this like big number that I was like, I'm going to get to $1 million in sales, and then I'm going to feel like I did it. And like I did it, and sure, I was like thriving professionally, but like personally I was at the lowest point of my life, like physically and emotionally. And I was just completely bootstrapped, completely burnt out. I didn't have a partner to turn to kind of carry the load with me. I have a great husband, but I didn't have a business partner to turn to carry the load. Yeah, and I just was like, what's my version of success? Is it like growth at any cost and constantly scaling and, just really burning the candle at both ends? Or is it like responsible growth? Is it a work-life balance? Is it being a good partner? Is it being a good mom? And I kind of figured out at the end of the day that that was what my version of success was.
I would say you still do a lot of things. Like the breadth of the work that you do for your clients is still pretty vast, but
Mhm.
you've created better boundaries around it, maybe.
A constant work in progress.
On that note, you are still connecting with really big and relevant brands every day. And while a lot of your trend work and your insights work is informing product, you're also looking at that big picture of how product and brand kind of interact, and you're informing brand campaigns. I know, the work that you did with us on Adidas was really setting the groundwork for some bigger
Mhm.
brand moments that they're going to be having. With that in mind, what's one piece of advice that you would give to brands today?
Yeah, I mean, informing product and brand is like really unique, and not everybody gets to straddle both worlds. And I think I'm like the most successful version of myself as a consultant and a creative and a strategist when brands engage me to consult on both. Because in most cases, brand and product are completely siloed from each other, and there's a huge disconnect when it comes time to talk to the consumer. So, like, product that's built in a bubble and marketing campaigns that are built in a bubble to speak to the product that was built in a bubble. By the time it gets down the funnel to the consumer, it's like, what were we doing here? Like, what was our point? So I'd say the best piece of advice I would give to brands is to really invest and start with like the why, and really like have a clear point of view and perspective on the positioning behind every single thing you do and make. So I'd say in general, like consumers, us, people, humans are drowning in product and overconsumption. And I don't think that people really need more things. So we're really seeing this shift where consumers are really hoping to understand why they should add a new shoe to their portfolio or a new puffer jacket, or do they need to invest in another piece that they've already got. um, so I think, you know if you can demonstrate to them why what you're making needs to exist, and that could either be through market research or one-on-one interviews with consumers, where you're recognizing like an unmet need that needs to be fulfilled, before you start developing a new season. I think you'll be it'll be more of a value add down the road for everyone.
Yep, I'm a big believer in figuring out the why. As you know, a lot of what
Yes,
we've done together has been rooted in that.
always.
You've worked as an agency partner for so many brands, and you're often this external voice that's speaking into bigger businesses. What do you think are some of the ingredients of a really great brand agency partnership?
Yeah, I would say trust is probably the most important ingredient for me, full stop. Like, it just can't be this like transactional relationship where like I give you a brief and you give me a strategy. Like, there's a ton of nuance that goes into these relationships. And I think brands really need to trust in us as agency partners to steer them in the right direction. And I obviously like communication comes into focus, and just like having clear expectations, and like, constantly checking in and making sure that like we're still aligned, we're still on the same page. I also think it's really important to be able to pivot within a scope or within a project, because like I can't tell you how many times I've been in a position with a client where they've like come to you with an idea that they think they want, but when I've really, or the team I'm working with has really kind of started to like look under the hood and dig into the work, it's quite clear that it's, that's not actually what they need. Or maybe we're thinking about this the wrong way and we need to kind of take a beat and get back in alignment. So I think like trust is important, and being able to like pivot is important, and then like revisiting the scope, the ask, the brief, and ensuring that like this is really what you need, and if it's not, like how can we get closer to doing the right work.
That's so true. And I think that's been a hallmark of some of our bigger projects that we've done together. Like if I look at our work with Allbirds,
Hmm.
with Adidas,
Hmm.
even way back when we worked with Hip Camp, it was a question of like, okay, what is the
Yeah.
need that we're answering? Let's not start with out like a solution.
Yeah.
Let's start with what the actual problem is that we need to solve.
Yeah. Going
And
back
and
to the
having that
why.
flexibility is so
Yeah.
important. That's
Yeah,
so
and if you
true.
don't, and so much of what you do at Monday and the message and like starting with the positioning, like that is so invaluable and like it builds such a strong foundation that I don't think brands really realize like why that investment is worth it. It will give us the tools we need to kind of take it and run in different directions, whether it be brand identity or brand voice or, marketing strategy. Like if we don't have that foundational piece to start with and the why, then we're just, I feel like it's arbitrary. Like we're just maybe we may as well just pick things out of the sky to say like this is the direction we're heading in. So yeah, aligned
Let's
there for sure.
Let's move to something fun. Trend, your
Okay.
world. What is one trend in brand or in marketing that you're seeing that you're just like super excited about or maybe really fascinated with right now?
Well, I'd say like I'm really interested in honesty right now, like radical transparency. I just think it's like with all of that's going on in the world, like as exciting as it is to talk about trends and micro trends and TikTok trends and all the things happening, like I think we just all really are craving radical honesty from the brands we are, investing in. And I think that means a lot of different things to a lot of different brands. And everyone is kind of in a different state of transition at the moment with the economy being in the shape it's in. But I think like being honest about wherever you are on your path, whether it be towards sustainability or ethical manufacturing or trying to design for disassembly or whatever the thing is that you're trying to do internally, like I think it's okay to talk about it and to say like we're not figuring it out or we've got a ways to go or our goal is maybe to be carbon neutral by 2028, but well, we're not going to get there. Like we're seeing brands starting to do that. Like Lego just announced they wouldn't be able to make all of their plastic bricks out of biodegradable materials because they realized after doing the research it would actually cause more pollution than making it out of biodegradable materials, and offset more carbon. So they decided to not do it. But like that's the kind of thing I'm like, okay, let's celebrate that. Like you made this lofty goal for yourselves. You didn't hit it. Like tell me why. Don't just like pull it off the website and it like go dark about it. So for me, I feel like that's a trend I'm really interested in is like radical transparency and honesty.
That's come up a lot in so many of the conversations that I've had about circularity. And I think it might be actually our mutual friend, Dominique Showers from Arc'teryx, that
Yep.
first kind of shed light on this, which is in the path to circularity for brands, there's so many unknowns, there's so many trade-offs, like you just described with the Lego one.
Hmm.
And the only way you can do it well is to just like bring people along on the journey and share the wins and losses along the way to be like, we tried this and it
Hmm.
worked or it didn't work, and here's why it didn't work, and just let people know that you're on this path, but that you're not gonna knock it out of the park every time.
Hmm. Yeah.
What brands do you think are doing it really well?
Sustainability and circularity, or just in general, who's
Maybe
creating
honesty.
honest. Yeah, I'd say like I think the running space is really interesting right now, and I know that like personally that's a place you're very interested as well. So I'd say like Norda and Satisfy and District Vision, like they're really creating like engaging content and community that's rooted in honesty and like humanity. Like it's a little messy, it's a little like real. And
I
then
think that
I'd
shows up
say,
even in the product. Like the product itself has almost like a distressed quality
yeah,
to it sometimes that kind of showcases
definitely.
that realness.
Yeah. In cycling, I love Pause Normal and Map. I think they're doing a great job in terms of developing really high-end premium performance apparel that functions, but then also like looks great and shows up in great colorways and feels really like something you'd want to be in, not just like something you want to ride your bike in. So that's pretty cool. In the outdoor space, there's a crop of brands coming out of Brooklyn that we love, like Hiker Kind and Almonds Right and William Ellery, and they're doing a great job of like building community and creative product that feels fresh and exciting. And then in terms of more like ready to wear, like lifestyle, I'm really like a big fan of Earth Studies out of Portland. And my favorite brand in the world right now is called Eat Dust, and they're out of Antwerp.
Tell us about Eat Dust. That's the only one I don't know.
Yeah, they're women. Well, it started as a menswear brand, and they launched women's, but it's kind of more of a like gender neutral, gender inclusive brand. And it's just this like, for me, it's like uniform dressing at its finest. It is like all of the silhouettes I want, classic timeless silhouettes done in really beautiful materials with a little bit of a twist. And they're just my absolute favorite. And they also have a shop in Paris, so you can see them either in Antwerp or Paris.
I mean, obviously, I love all those running brands that you mentioned. I wish they all had more of a focus on women, but maybe we'll get there eventually.
Sure.
But it's really fun to see cycling and running, how fashion is really
Hmm.
showing up in that way. And I think those brands that you called out of New York, those are the ones that I'm watching the closest right now. It's
Hmm.
been amazing to see how they're fostering community. Like I'm
Hmm.
seeing that the crew from Hiker Kind, the boys from Outlandish, just continually
Hmm.
getting crews of people out
Hmm.
into the wilderness
Yeah.
together to grow their brand, but they are legitimately building community while
Hmm.
they're doing it.
Hmm. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about like the outdoor industry is so community focused and so like it is this extension of self and this big family. And I think you find your people in the outdoors. And it's like something I've never experienced in any other industry.
So, Janine, you have your fingers in lots of interesting things. What is coming down the line for you, or what are you excited about that's coming up for you?
Yes. Well, I'm continuing to kind of like I wouldn't say build my business. I would say maintain my business. Like Range is always going to be around in some form or iteration as a creative consultancy, which allows me to kind of do that trend and concept work, the strategy work, the insights work. So like that will kind of just like keep on a steady growth level plateau. And I'm also launching on the side a fun little experiment in vintage furniture, like leaning into this idea of circularity and sustainability. Um, I've noticed that, and I mean, within my own personal habits as well as people around me, that apparel I think tends to come and go, and we don't feel as connected to it. Maybe not, that's pretty broad strokes, but with furniture, I feel like you inherit pieces or you invest in pieces that you keep forever. Like I've got pieces of furniture that I've had for 10 to 20 years. And I consider them to be heirloom items that I want to hand down to my daughter. So I'm like leaning into a little bit of a vintage furniture space, as a little bit of like a fun side project to express myself creatively, um, and get to know my local community here a little bit better.
Is there a name for it?
Yes, it's called In Season, and it will be launching in 2024. And our tagline is heirloom goods and vintage furniture.
Amazing. Janine, where can people find you and follow you online?
They can find me at thisisrange.com, on social media at thisisrange, and on LinkedIn as Jeanine Pesce.
Amazing. Always love talking to you. Thanks for
Always.
joining me.
Thanks for having me.